Hi, this is Neil Lieberman with the Funniest Laugh in Show Business. Welcome to my stand-up comedy seminar. It's a very successful seminar that's been given all over the country, but now, as you can tell, you can listen to it in the privacy of your own home, wearing only pajamas and eating a big bowl of Jell-O. My full-time job is as a private one-on-one comedy coach, and I work with people locally here in San Francisco and also all across the country and in parts of Europe. And although this tape is chock full of valuable information for those of you who want to be stand-up comedians or improve your sense of humor, nothing beats private one-on-one coaching. Stand-up comedy is a very specific individual art form, which is why many of my private clients work with me for a year, 2 years, 3 years. The bottom line is to get work as a stand-up comedian. My students work. Most of them go on to make more money than I do, and then they don't return my phone calls. Am I bitter? Well, that's a whole nother set of tapes. Perhaps the most important thing I can tell you about this business of stand-up comedy is to keep your blinders on. You're going to hear an awful lot of things coming your way, positive and negative. It's important that you set your sights on your goal and you concentrate only on that. You'll hear things like, get out of the business, you suck, you're too ethnic, you're not ethnic enough. You're too ugly, you're too fat, you're too skinny, you're too good looking to be a comedian. Keep your blinders on, keep your eyes set on your goal. There are many, many books written about stand-up comedy, how to become a stand-up comedian, and the main problem with these books is they tend to generalize. They also give you exercises in writing joke formula jokes. The problem is no one is doing joke formula jokes anymore unless you're over 70 years old and you're playing to the retirement home circuit. Your first goal as a stand-up comedian is a 5-minute routine. 5 minutes is the maximum amount of time that most clubs in the United States will let you do. Why is that? Well, there are a lot of people trying to do stand-up comedy right now, and if there are 20 comedians at an open mic, they want to make sure the show is moving smoothly, they get done in a couple hours. You're not there at 3 o'clock in the morning waiting to get on to do your 5 minutes. So respect that 5-minute time limit. The club will appreciate it, and so will the other comedians. Now, when I talk about a 5-minute routine, what I'm really talking about is 4 minutes and 15 seconds of actual material. We're leaving a 45-second window for laughs, and hopefully you will get those laughs. 5 minutes may not seem like an incredibly long time, but if you're up there and you're not getting laughs, it can be an eternity. So 5 minutes is really 4 minutes and 15 seconds of actual material with a 45-second window for laughs. A 5-minute routine consists of 4 subjects, 4 different subjects, 3 jokes within each subject. So if you do the math, I'll hold, go ahead. That's 12 jokes or 12 laughs in a 5-minute routine. Why is this? Okay, let's go back to the open mic. There are 20 comedians. You're comedian number 6. The audience is already burned out after comedian number 5. They're distracted. There's a blender going. Someone dropped a glass. People are talking. Someone's giving blood down front. Many things are going on to distract the audience. So we need to keep the audience's attention in the best way we possibly can. So if we talk about 10 different subjects in 5 minutes, we're all over the place. They're not able to follow us. They don't want to follow us. They're just not going to follow us. If we talk about only one subject in 5 minutes, it may be too long and boring on that one subject. And if they're not with you from the beginning, you have an awful long time to go within that same subject. So 4 subjects, 3 jokes within each subject seems to be about what an open mic audience in particular can understand and absorb. 4 things you want to concentrate on when you're putting together this 5 minutes. And number 1 is clean material. What do I mean by that? Well, you can use clinical and biological terms. You can say, for instance, penis or vagina. Please have the children leave the room at this portion of the tape. But you must be careful. It should be clean, TV clean, not cable TV clean, network TV clean. So you won't have to change your act later on. For instance, if you're playing a children's birthday party or a younger audience, you will not have to alter your routine. Clean material, very, very important. You never know who's out there in an open mic situation. There could be 3 drunks, and the guy sitting in the back of the room, half asleep, could be an agent for television. And if you're doing dirty material, he immediately writes you off. Number 2 is mass audience appeal material. We want to be writing material that, again, we can use at an old age home or at a children's birthday party, and we never have to change our act. We don't aim the material at just old people, just young people, just black people, just white people, just Asian people, just short people, just tall people. I think you get the idea. We want everyone to understand what we're talking about. Whether they laugh, that's another story altogether, but if they understand what we're talking about, we have a good chance to get that laugh. Number 3 is fresh, new material. Once you're labeled a thief in the comedy business, whether you are or not, it's impossible to erase that. So a lot of my students bring in material on a weekly basis. If it looks, sounds, or smells like anything that's ever been done before, we're not going to use it. This is why I recommend that you do not watch stand-up comedy on television. There's an awful lot of it on right now. It's not the greatest. And subconsciously, you're sucking in all this material that 2 months later you end up writing as your own. This is completely unintentional. No one means to do it. But when students bring in jokes and I say, I'm sorry, this has been done before, they said, well, I just wrote that this morning. I said, yeah, but you heard it 2 months ago. So be careful. Don't watch too much comedy. You should be sitting down to write comedy as if you have never heard comedy before. You don't know what stand-up comedy is. What's funny to you? Also, after you've been doing a routine for a while, a year or 2 years, the same material, continue to write new material. Keep the act fresh. So far we've talked about clean, mass audience appeal, fresh, new material. Number 4, and the most obvious, is dressing properly. What does this mean? You can go to any open mic any night of the week, and 99.9% of the comedians will be wearing t-shirt, tennis shoes, and jeans. I don't recommend this look, so to speak. Again, you should be dressing at least as well or better than. It is a job. It's a job. Treat it as a job. It's as if you're clocking in. They're actually paying you. It is show business. You need to look good. You never know who's out there in the audience. Okay. Why are these 4 points so important? Clean, mass audience appeal material, fresh new material, and dressing properly. Because you never know who's out there in the audience, and you want to look and sound professional. Now, the people who hire comedians are not comedy people. They think they're comedy people, but they're really business people. They're in the bar and restaurant business, the comedy club business. They're trying to sell a product. Whatever it is, you need to impress them. Let's say your act is hysterically funny, and people are rolling in the aisles laughing. But it's dirty, it's to a specific group of people, it's someone else's material or the same material you've been doing for the last couple of years, and you're wearing t-shirt, tennis shoes, and jeans. These people will not hire you. Let's say you're just medium funny, but it's clean, it has mass audience appeal, it's fresh, new, beautiful material, and you look great. This is what they want in their club. You are representing their club, their film, their commercial, whatever it is. So try to keep this in the back of your mind. None of this is written in stone. These are recommendations that I make to you. Again, it is a very specific art form, and you need to find out what is right for you. The next item is a hook. What's a hook? A hook is a gimmick. It's something you're doing every third or fourth joke or so, something you're doing or saying that the audience can remember you by. Audiences will not remember comedians' names. Comedians don't remember comedians' names. In fact, comedians rarely remember their own names. So we need you to be remembered. How are we going to do that? With a hook. A hook can be a facial expression that you're making every third or fourth joke. Get us that comic who smirks a lot after every joke. That's who we want. We can't remember his name, but find him. It can be one word, like using the word brilliant sarcastically. Get us that brilliant comic. That's who we want. It can be a sentence or a phrase, something you say all the time in conversation and either realize or don't realize you're saying. For instance, I get no respect is a very popular hook that Rodney Dangerfield uses. More people know the hook than know the name Rodney Dangerfield. Again, something you'd say in conversation. I had a student with me a couple weeks ago, and about the third time he said, I'm not real happy about that. I said, that's your hook. So he's the not real happy about that comic. So keep an eye out for it. You don't want a limiting hook. You want something broad-based that you can hang on any type of material. One of my students started out with a hook, I'm incredibly good looking. I was conceived on designer sheets. I bought a wallet last week. My picture was in it. Okay, 2 marginally funny jokes. Way too limiting. You need something broad-based you can hang on any type of material. Again, you don't need a hook. You don't have to have a hook. These are just things that I suggest for you to be successful. If you don't want to be successful, burn this tape right now. Okay, we talked about the act having mass audience appeal. Now, although the act has mass audience appeal, it's really 50% mass audience, 50% personal. Let's go back. People probably won't remember your name. They might remember your hook, but they will definitely remember something personal you share about yourself. If you're on stage and you're getting great laughs and you're this human joke machine and you don't share anything personal about yourself, you're forgotten immediately, and we can't afford to be forgotten. There are too many people trying to do this right now, and we must stand out from the pack. It's called leaving something on the plate. When you leave the stage, there is still a hunk of parsley up there, and they're going to remember you. 50% personal, 50% mass audience appeal. You're only up there for 5 minutes, so you need to make an impression. Get some laughs, make sure they know who you are, something personal about yourself, so they can walk away from that show and possibly not remember your name, maybe remember your hook, but definitely remember something personal, and that will stick in their mind much more than just a couple of really funny jokes, believe it or not. Let's talk about writing jokes. How do we write stand-up comedy? Well, again, we're not going to use the books. There are no joke formulas. You need to sit down and write as if you've never heard stand-up comedy before. What's funny to you? I recommend an hour every day, same time every day. Just get used to the regiment of sitting down at your computer, whether you use a computer, a pad of paper, a typewriter, a chisel, whatever it is, get used to writing for an hour a day. Most important thing I can tell you is don't edit yourself. Just vomit stuff out on paper. I don't even want to see anything that looks like a perfect joke from my students. If they happen to write one, fine. But it's really about just emptying your head for an hour a day. There's no such thing as writer's block. Writer's block does not exist. If I sit down to write and I can't think of a thing, I'll just start typing. I can't think of a thing to write about. I had Cheerios for breakfast this morning. Whatever it is, I just start talking, start writing, and eventually material will come. You're funny people. You're going to write funny stuff. If I absolutely can't think of anything to write about, I will blindly open the yellow pages, stick my finger in the middle. Oh, plumbers. Anything funny ever happen with a plumber? Maybe. I'll open the yellow pages again. Lawyers. Lawyers? Definitely. Lots of material there. Every occupation, every location, every situation is in the yellow pages. This is not an advertisement for the yellow pages. This is what I use. Now, you're going to find things that work for you. Some people need to read a book, see a movie. Some people need to go out some people just need to go out and experience life. You must feed your head. You must feed the brain in order to write. If you just sit home in a closet, there's very little to write about. So we're not writing joke formulas. Comedy today is much more observational. This is things you see, things you experience every day of your life, and so does everyone else. Now here's the difference. There are comedians like yourself, and there are what I call the fog people. The fog people live in a fog. They don't see anything. They just kind of putter through life, not paying attention to much. And as comedians, we pick things up, We dissect them, we bisect them, we show them to the fog people and say, look, fog people, look at how ridiculous life is. Doesn't matter what it is. If you're in a bathroom in your friend's house, how come when you wash your hands, you always wash the bubbles off the soap and put it back, and then dry your hands behind the guest towel and straighten it? Everybody does this. Nobody talks about it. Whether you go to the bank, the supermarket, the gas station, so do the fog people. So pay attention to what's going on. We talked about it being not formula, not editing yourself, vomiting stuff out on paper, writing observational. Looking for the yellow pages when you can't think of anything to write about. Commercials. National television commercials are a great topic because the fog people are home, they're watching the commercials, they're eating the potato chips, they're talking on the phone, they're drinking the water. They're not really paying attention, they're half paying attention to the television set and the commercials. So if you bring this up to them, they will laugh. We all watch television. I prefer national commercials. That way you do not have to change your act when you go to various towns throughout the country. Everybody knows what you're talking about immediately. Two ways really to write jokes about commercials, and one is to do what you do when you're sitting there with your friends and just rip the commercial apart in every possible way, making fun of the people on the commercial, making fun of the product of the commercial, making fun of the quality of the commercial as a whole. And the second way, and my favorite way, is just to repeat verbatim, word for word, exactly what's being said in the commercial. My, this is good tasting tuna. Bathroom bowl sure is dirty. People do not talk this way in real life. So when you bring this up to the fog people, they're going to get it right away and laugh at how ridiculous these commercials are. Another idea for writing material, pet peeves. Anything you're ticked off about, that's what you want to write about. Because it's coming from the heart, it's coming from the gut, and when you get on stage and you're delivering this material to the audience, they believe you. They believe you're really angry because you are really angry. And believe me, we're all angry a lot. We find things that upset us, and we don't always see the humor in it right away. It's been said, and I'm not sure this is true or not, but it's been said that comedy is pain plus time. And in some ways that is true. When you can't see the humor in something immediately, you may see it in 6 months. In addition to writing for that hour a day, it's a good idea to carry a little tape recorder with you and or a pad of paper. And as funny things occur to you, you can jot them down. As you say funny things to friends and they laugh, you can jot them down. It's always a good idea not to let them see you taking these notes, because once they know that their reactions are being recorded, then they're going to react differently. So sneak off into another room and jot something down or talk into the tape recorder. The only problem with this technique is I know many comedians who have drawers filled with little scraps of paper and little audio cassettes, and they have never taken the time to transcribe that into material. And that's one thing you can do with that hour a day, is transcribe all your tapes and your scratch paper, things you've scribbled on napkins, etc. Another great way to write and come up with comedy material is to brainstorm, perhaps with a comedy coach like myself. You need to find someone you can trust, someone whose sense of humor you can trust. A friend can be dangerous. Another comedian can be very dangerous. And I've seen many friendships between comedians break up. They're brainstorming, they're throwing ideas back and forth about a certain subject, coming up with really funny lines, and then they get into an argument about who thought of the funny line and who's going to use that line in their act. So be careful of who you brainstorm with. So you've done your writing. You're writing for an hour a day. Do it for several months. Get as much material as you possibly can. Try to pick out what you think is the funniest of that material. If you're working with me, of course, I'm helping you edit, punch up, and structure the material. And that's what we're going to talk about next, is structure. You have 12 jokes in your act. We talked about that earlier. 4 subjects, 3 jokes within each subject, 12 laughs in your routine. Now, 6 of those 12 jokes are going to be funnier than the other 6. It's just going to work out that way. You want to open the act with 3 of your funniest jokes. In other words, you want to get laughs immediately. You want the audience to like you and be on your side right away, because if they're not on your side, it's going to be an awfully long 5 minutes. Funny material right up front. You're going to have some jokes, perhaps 6 other jokes, that are not quite as funny. Those jokes are going to go in the middle of the act. They already like you. You started out strong. You're going to hope that that's going to carry over for the next 6 jokes that they're not weak jokes. They're just not quite as strong as the opening jokes. You're going to do those, and then you're going to close the act with the 3 remaining funniest jokes. 3 funniest jokes at the beginning, 3 funniest jokes at the end, some of the not so funny, as funny stuff in the middle of the act. So you're going to open strong, you're going to close strong, and hopefully that material in the middle will be liked because they like you. It's always nice to start with a quick opening laugh if possible. If you have something physical about yourself that's obvious, for instance, you have one huge ear, you might want to mention that ear, get a laugh off it, and move on. It also helps the audience to forget about the huge ear, and they're able to concentrate on the rest of the material. There are a couple techniques I'd like you to watch for when you are looking at comics, although I don't recommend you look at comics. It's okay to go to a top nightclub once every 6 months and see a really great comedian. And these are not formulas, these are techniques. One is called a running gag. A running gag is when you do a joke at the beginning of the act and refer to it several times throughout the act. The next technique is a callback, which, like the running gag, you do at the beginning of the act and then refer to it only once later on for even greater response, sometimes even an applause break. I'd love to give you examples of these techniques, but I would have to do 20 minutes worth of material in order for you to get that. But I do recommend that you look for it when you're watching great comics. The way we structure the act, funny, weaker, funny, is very important. It's also important to structure the act mass audience appeal, personal material, mass audience appeal. So when you open up your act, I recommend that you do something mass audience appeal, like a joke about television commercial, something observational that everyone does. If you open the act with personal material, they don't know you yet, they don't care about you yet, they don't want to hear about your personal life. But if they like you after your first 3 jokes and you've done some mass audience appeal material, then they're more apt to accept you and your personality, what your life is about, etc. So mass audience appeal at the beginning, sneak the personal stuff in the middle of the act, and end with mass audience appeal. Again, this is just sort of general advice. Your act is your act, and you need to structure it the way that you feel comfortable doing that. But it's good to have a nice mix of mass audience and personal material. Just in case they don't like the mass audience appeal material, they might like the personal material, or vice versa. It's important to have variance in the act so that the act is not all one note. It is not all the same tone of voice. It is not all the same type of material. So change it up a little bit. Keep it interesting to the audience. So let's say you've written your material, you've done your hour a day of writing, you've vomited stuff out on paper, you've done it for a long period of time, you've edited the act, you've now structured the act, funny, weaker, funny, mass audience appeal, personal, mass audience. You've looked at some different techniques of different stand-up comics, but the act is still very much your own. Now I recommend extreme over-rehearsal. Script the act, write it out on paper, memorize it. How do you memorize the act? Well, one great way is a tape recorder. If you recite the act into a tape recorder and play it over and over again like you remember the lyrics to a song, you will remember the words to a joke. Tape recorder is an excellent idea. You can do that all day long. File cards are a great idea. If you have 12 jokes, you now have 12 file cards, each with one joke on them. You take one file card with you for a week, looking at that joke constantly. You will never, ever forget that joke for the rest of your life, even if you want to. Rehearse the act, memorize the act. How do you go about rehearsing? Again, I believe in over-rehearsal. If I call my students at 3 o'clock in the morning and say, what line comes after this one? Out of a dead sleep, they're going to know the answer to that. And that takes away all of the fear of performance when you know that material backwards and forwards. What the over-rehearsal does for you is something I like to call rehearsed spontaneity. It makes it look like the ideas are just flying off the top of your head. But I can tell you right now that if you go to any comedy club in this country and see a headliner performing on Monday night, 20 minutes into his act, he's going to be doing a certain joke, a certain way, and probably getting a great response. If you go back to the same club and see the same comedian 4 days later, 20 minutes into his act, he's going to be saying the same line in the same way, getting great response, but it's going to look like he just thought of it. It just flew off the top of his head. And that's what we're doing in rehearsal. The more rehearsing we do, the more spontaneous it seems. I know that doesn't make a lot of sense to a lot of people, but it really does work. As you're rehearsing the act, you should go through the script with a pencil or a highlighter and highlight at least one key word in every joke. Usually in the setup portion of the joke, which is the beginning portion, the information portion of the joke. If the joke is about pickles, then you underline the word pickles, and that's the word you're going to emphasize when you're rehearsing. What is the joke about? The joke is about pickles. If the audience doesn't hear that, if they don't hear the word pickles, the punchline is not going to work because they're not going to know what the heck you're talking about. It's important while you're rehearsing that you are not reading off paper. It is memorized. You're certainly not reciting the joke. You're not even really telling the joke. You're explaining the joke. You've heard the joke a million times. You wrote it. You've rehearsed it a million times. The person in the audience who is distracted by the glass breaking, by the blender, etc., this person needs to absorb what you're talking about. So you really need to be clear, enunciate, emphasize key words in the setup of the joke, explain the joke to the audience. It's almost as if you're talking to a 3-year-old. You see, this joke is about pickles. There's no question what the joke is about. It's about pickles. Clear, emphasized setup words in the joke are key to the joke working. It's important to develop a rhythm of speaking. Of course, you already have a certain rhythm of speaking, but when you're on stage, it's really your personality, your rhythm of speaking times 10. You're just that much bigger than yourself. It's really difficult for you as a comedian to look at your own act, your own material, your own rehearsal, your own rhythm of speech by yourself. And that's why people come to me as a coach. So whether you come to me or you go to someone else for coaching, it's real important to have an outside eye, someone who can really hear what you sound like. It's much like talking into a tape recorder and playing it back and going, who the heck was that? That doesn't sound like me at all. It's very difficult for you to hear yourself, and even on videotape, to see yourself and critique that. Many comedians get laughs from their natural rhythm of speaking. Rodney Dangerfield does it. Jackie Mason does it. There are hundreds of comedians who do that. If you saw their act on paper, you would say, gee, I really don't see any jokes or punchlines here, and yet they're getting laughs every 3 or 4 seconds or so, and that's because of their natural rhythm of speaking. Now, as you're rehearsing this material, I recommend going out to some local music shop, buying a microphone stand, buying a microphone, and rehearsing. Do not, I repeat, do not stand in front of a mirror and rehearse. Everyone wants to run to the mirror with their hairbrush, talk into the hairbrush, and do their routine. No, you need to practice as if you're actually in a club. So buy a microphone stand, buy a microphone. You don't have to plug it in. It doesn't really need to be amplified. You need to get used to standing behind it, not looking in a mirror. If you look in a mirror, for instance, you're making all these facial expressions and gestures, and when you get on stage, there is no mirror. It's just you and a light in your face. So if you want to rehearse like you're in a nightclub, get a microphone stand, get a microphone, turn the blender on, turn the TV on full blast, turn the stereo on, flush the toilet, put a blindfold on. That's exactly what it's like in a club. Lots of distraction of every kind. And if you can get through your act in that way, you are not going to have a problem in a club at all. Let's go back to memorizing the material real quickly. We talked about doing it into a tape recorder. We talked about file cards. You also might want to make a set list. A set list is one word that represents each one of your jokes. So if you have 12 jokes in your act, you now have 12 words, one word representing each joke, in the order of the routine. Many comedians don't have trouble remembering the words to the jokes. They have trouble remembering the order of the jokes. So if you can remember these 12 words, memorize these 12 words, you will never forget them. You will never have trouble on stage remembering what the next joke is. Now, when you go to do this act at an open mic or wherever you're performing, do not bring your material with you. Do not bring the script of your act with you. If you keep it in your pocket and you go up on stage, I promise you, you will forget the act because you know what's in your pocket. It's much better to just come with a blank piece of paper while you're waiting to go on, sit down and write out your set list, write out your 12 words, and concentrate on that. There are many, many distractions in the club itself. People will want to talk to you. There are people performing. Make sure you keep focused. Let's talk briefly about the fear of performance. Now, a lot of people say, well, picture the audience naked. Well, a lot of times that can be really, really disgusting, but it does work for some people. Again, the over-rehearsal will help you to lose that fear of performance. When there's no question in your mind as to what the next joke is, there's very little fear. Once you start performing, get as much stage time as you possibly can. The more you're used to being on that stage, the more comfortable you will feel. It's only 5 minutes out of your life. It's only 5 minutes out of your life. Once you're on stage and you have some nervousness, and you really should have some nervousness, there should be some adrenaline running through your body. This is some of the fun of performing. You have all this energy built up in you. Use that energy positively. Don't fidget, don't look nervous. Just channel all that energy from your body up through your body into your face and your voice, and really project, make your facial expressions the way you're comfortable doing, making sure you're explaining those jokes, emphasizing where it's necessary, and you'll feel very, very comfortable on stage. Let's go back again. You've written it, you've structured it, you've rehearsed it, you've memorized it. Now you need to actually get up and do it. Do you think you can do that? I had a feeling you could. You might want to prepare an introduction for yourself. When you're at an open mic, the way they usually work is there's a list. You sign up on the list. Someone takes this list into a back room, puts it into an order they're comfortable with, and then posts this list. So let's say you're comic number 6. Right as comic number 5 goes on stage, the MC will come over to you and say, you're going up next. What would you like me to say about you? It's always good to have an introduction ready. If you say, well, go ahead, say whatever you want about me, they will, and you won't be happy with it. So even if it's just one quick line, he's originally from Cleveland, let's hear it for so-and-so. You can give the MC a laugh line. If you have a joke that you think would work for him as part of your introduction, fine. But be prepared with something. Other things you can do while you're preparing to go on stage for the first time or any time is to look through your act, and let's say you're in the middle, you're in Missouri, and you have a joke about some chain store, some local store in the town you're from, and you want to make sure the joke works. So, for instance, if the joke is about 7-Eleven, and they don't have a 7-Eleven in this city, but they have a Quickie Mart or something, then you might want to change that to Quickie Mart so that they can understand the joke. Again, if you keep your jokes real mass audience, you will not have to make these changes. You must spend a lot of time in the club before you go on concentrating on your act. Now, we talked about distractions. Other people will distract you. Other people will try to distract you so you don't give as good a show. Don't let them do that. Take your time, write out your set list. 2 comedians before you go on. They've posted the list. You're number 6. When comedian number 4 goes on, get up. Go into the bathroom. Go out to your car. Walk around the block. And do your act full out. Full volume. Get as loose as you possibly can. Because if you're sitting in the club for an hour waiting to go on, you're going to develop some rust. So you need to be as loose as possible. It's important once you're introduced to thank the MC, unless every other comic before you has done that. But if you're comic number 6 and no one has thanked the MC, as he introduces you, come up to the stage, you say thank you, and you say, hey, let's hear it again for so-and-so. And make sure that they get their due, because when you're in the MC, you're going to want someone to do that for you. It's important now that you've worked on the act and structured it and written it, that you do not eke up to the microphone stand nervously. You should approach the microphone stand and the microphone as if you can't wait to tell us these jokes. That's how funny they are. That's how important it is to you, and the audience needs to see that in your face. I can promise you that no matter what club you're in, the microphone stand will always be at the wrong height. Every microphone stand works the same way. There is a center section of the microphone stand that turns left and right. Always turn it left to loosen the microphone stand in order to make it taller or shorter, or turn it right to tighten it in the position once you've got it where you want. So it's lefty-loosey, righty-tighty. You'll never forget that. 2 things you need to cover when you're first coming up on stage, and that is to greet the audience and find out how they are. There are a million ways to do this. Hi, how you doing tonight? Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. How is everyone this evening? Any way you're comfortable greeting them and finding out how they are is fine. Do you care how they are? No. Do they know you don't care how they are? Yes. It doesn't matter. What it does is it gives them 5, 6, 7 seconds to realize, oh, there's another comedian on stage. This is what they look like. This is what they sound like. Now I can adjust myself in my seat and I'm ready to listen to comedy from this new person. If you walk out on stage and tell your first joke immediately without greeting them, they are not ready for it. They're still taking it in and seeing who you are, what you sound like, and what you look like. So you've adjusted the mic, you've smiled, you've greeted them. You may want to comment on the surroundings. For instance, if someone sitting down front is on fire, you might want to mention that. Something obvious about the room, again, is a quick way to get a good first quick laugh. It's very important that when you're on stage that you look down and around at the audience. I see a lot of comics make the mistake of playing over the audience's head. You're elevated. You're on a stage. They're below you, sitting at tables. You have a light in your face. You probably can't see them, but you know they're down there. So look in their direction. Look down and around. Play the entire room of the audience, even if you can see them or cannot see them. It's very important to connect with the audience. You play over the top of their heads. You are not connecting with them. I recommend that all comedians use a mic stand. Most people have this picture in their mind of what a comedian looks like. It's this person holding the microphone, pacing around on stage, looking at the ground for material. It has absolutely nothing to do with comedy. It's a huge distraction, and we cannot afford to distract the audience in an open mic situation. If we're gesturing, even if the microphone is in the stand and we're gesturing constantly with our hands, that's a distraction. It doesn't mean anything anymore. The most uncomfortable position for any human being to be in, on stage or off, is standing straight up with your arms hanging to your sides. But it looks the most comfortable to the audience, and that's who we're concerning ourselves with. Is the audience comfortable? We're working. It's a job. It doesn't matter if we're uncomfortable. They need to be laughing and enjoying themselves. Standing straight up with your arms hanging to your sides, looking down and around at the audience. If you need to remove the microphone from the stand for a very specific reason, like for this joke you need to be lying on the ground, that just adds to the joke, then fine, we can do that. But the microphone stand was invented to hold the microphone, and that's what it shall do. The microphone and the microphone stand also act as an arrow that points to your mouth. And again, this is where the jokes are coming from. This is where we want the audience looking. We don't want them distracted. We want them looking at your face and your mouth, because that's where the jokes are coming from.